Okay, just give it another minute, or just less than a minute, and then we'll get going. Okay, everyone, so what we'll do is we'll make a start, and anyone that joins in the middle, you might hear the doorbell, Noor, so just letting you know that in advance. So good morning to everyone. Thank you for coming to the South Asian Women in Higher Education Network's Researcher Series 2026. It's really great to have you here with us for the third talk in the series. Just to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Dr. Rumi Begum. I'm a senior lecturer in nutrition and exercise science, and I'm based at the University of Westminster in London. In terms of SAWHE then, I'm also the events manager, and today I'll be co-chairing with another member of the inner circle, Dr. Saima Rahman Khan. So really very quickly to say then, as a network, our intention is for these sessions to enable us to pursue knowledge, but also to form connections with one another and inspire the SAWHE community. We hope that by amplifying the voices of South Asian women and sharing research and exchanging ideas, we can create this supportive academic community within disciplines and across disciplines. So with that quick introduction, I'm going to pass over to Saima to introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Rumi, and good morning, everyone, or close to good afternoon. My name is Saima, and I'm the founder of SAWHE, and I'm also a research project manager working across sectors. And today it's my pleasure to co-chair the session with Rumi, who's been leading the series and created this really nice space for researchers to share their research and also for us to spotlight these amazing voices from the South Asian community. And with this, a warm welcome to a third speaker of this researcher series, Noor Aqsa. To introduce her work, Noor Aqsa is a PhD researcher. She's a postgraduate teaching assistant and educational outreach fellow at the University of Leeds. And her research broadly explores how culture, context, and education intersect to shape both pedagogical practice and psychological understanding. And she specifically examines the experiences of minoritized populations in higher education, particularly within the British South Asian demographic. So perfect for our audience today. And she also explores how cultural nuances shape students' experiences and investigates how universities can better support these groups. She has had her publications out, so do reach out to this publication and read further on her work. Her blog is also out on LinkedIn, on SAWHE Voices, so please do connect with her. And she's bringing a lot of different angles of her work. And her current research is also on Islamic psychology, where she explores the intersection between Islamic and Western psychological paradigms, examining both the synergies and tensions between them. So without any ado, please join us in welcoming Noor Aqsa. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to hearing about your research. Over to you, Noor.
Thank you so much. That was a really nice introduction. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here, and I hope everyone finds this to be informative and beneficial. But yeah, any questions at the end, please feel free. And my LinkedIn will be at the last slide too, so feel free to connect with me at any point. Okay, so this talk is going to be on the imposter syndrome feelings among South Asian undergraduate students. So this is in sync with my publication, so I'll kind of be presenting that work, what I found, and what the key take homes are as well. But I think before we go straight into what the research is about and what my findings were, I think a little bit about me, just so everyone knows what context I'm coming from. And I think it's so important in research not to separate the researcher from the researcher. I think my positionality and what I bring to my research very much affects the findings and the overall methodology. So yeah, we'll just talk a bit about that now. So I'm a female South Asian. I'm Pakistani. I like to make it clear I'm half Kashmiri. So my granddad was from Srinagar and he's from Jammu Kashmir, so the Indian side, well, it's Indian occupied, but I like to see Kashmir in its own right. So I'm half Kashmiri and I'm half Pakistani. And my mother is a clinical psychologist. So I always like to mention that because I think that very much changed the environment I grew up in. I was very much surrounded by conversations that address mental health and psychology, and that was very much encouraged to me from a very young age. That definitely puts me in an unusual footing. It's just me and mum at home, so that was very much the only narrative that I had growing up. So very enriched conversations throughout my whole life. I was born and raised in Newcastle, very white dominant. I was the only girl of colour in my entire school, and that continued up until sixth form. So again, I found the past 5 years of my life very much reclaiming my identity. I think I was almost a little bit ignorant to being a South Asian Muslim because it just wasn't really a conversation. I always kind of felt like the odd one out, but didn't really think much of it. It wasn't until I went to University of Leeds for my undergrad when I met like-minded peers and I found commonality with them. I met a lot of Muslim South Asian friends, and connecting with them, I felt like I started to investigate and explore a lot more of my heritage. And with that, I found an interest in the South Asian demographic and want to nurture that. I'm also obviously I'm a hijabi as well, and I'm Muslim. I claim that very proudly. That very much is a big part of my research as well. I do feel a sense of responsibility and passion and a desire to sort of bridge that gap between Islam and psychology. I think there's a lot of practices within psychology that are very much westernized frameworks that are being utilized, but I'm looking actually at what we can do to sort of temper these frameworks to make them more inclusive for Islamic culture and Islamic and South Asian cultures as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I am in my second year of my PhD. So I got a scholarship. So I did my undergrad for 4 years. I did a placement year as well. I got a scholarship and I went straight to PhD. So that was a really big gap. I didn't do a master's. I went straight. Again, a lot of imposter syndrome, as we'll come to touch on within that. I was the youngest. I was 22 when I started my PhD, and sitting in a space full of a lot of older adults, I did often feel like I wasn't meant to be there and felt very strange and in an alien environment. But yeah, we'll talk about that too. So I'm someone who's very much subject to the phenomenon that I'm going to be discussing now. So yeah, with that in mind, let's start about my research. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome in students? I think imposter syndrome is very much a buzzword at the minute. I think it's kind of all over media. I think it's kind of pervading through everything. I think everyone's kind of claiming that they have imposter syndrome. It's a very, very common phenomenon to be feeling. So in essence, imposter syndrome refers to the tendency of attributing your success to factors, for example, luck and a fluke. So you're sort of attributing all your success to external factors rather than internalizing them yourself. So you're not feeling like you're worthy of your achievements. You're not actually claiming them. You're very much feeling like you're undeserving, that you're a fraud, that basically you're going to get found out essentially one day. So you're always feeling incompetent and undeserving. And it's a perpetual feeling. This feeling doesn't really go away. No matter what you achieve, what promotion you get, what pay rise you get, you'll always have this little voice in your head of like, you're going to get found out. I'm not good enough. This isn't for me. Over 70% of the general population actually experience this, and it's particularly within professionals. Up to 82% of professionals feel this phenomenon. So it's actually more prevalent in those who shouldn't be feeling it. Interestingly, it's actually the whole essence of imposter syndrome is that despite there's any confirmatory evidence, so despite there being very, very obvious and objective evidence that you've succeeded and you've got this grade or you've got to the space you're in, you've still got this feeling. But yeah, it's actually more prominent in those who probably shouldn't be feeling like it. So minoritized students. So they feel imposter syndrome more than any other population. And minoritized students particularly, research has found that they naturally have more heightened anxiety. There's also higher dropout rates, and they have reduced levels of confidence. It's really, really important to not treat these minoritized students as a homogeneous group. So to not assume that every single minoritized student feels the same way as each other, because each culture, as we know, each culture has a very different set of social, economic, religious factors. So it's really important to not just subsume every minoritized student to have the same experience of imposter syndrome, because that's not true. So just keep that in mind when we're going through my research. This is very much to the South Asian population. My research is representative of the sample that I had, but it's not to be generalized to every single South Asian community either. That's one of the take homes that we'll talk about later on as well. But yeah, within minoritized students, there's this persistent self-doubt that research has found, and that's compounded with a lack of emotional support from the family home as well. Particularly within the South Asian population, research has found that they are labelled with this model minority label. So South Asians are sort of meant to be this idealized academic repertoire for everyone else to sort of go off and look back on. But with that level of pressure, that will have a counterproductive result, because the amount of pressure that you're inflicting on South Asians by kind of saying like they're going to be perfect, they're the example to kind of go off, that's your role model, you're feeding into this imposter syndrome phenomenon. So we'll come into exactly why that is as well. But yeah, this is my research question. So when I was doing my literature review and when I was sort of picking my question, I realized there's a lot of literature on imposter syndrome. there's a lot on the minoritized population, but I felt like there was nothing bridging the gap. There was nothing on the South Asian population specifically. And to be honest, when I was doing my literature review and when I was looking, I really found that there was a lot on mixed race experience. There's quite a lot on the Black experience, as it should be. However, I felt like South Asians, we always fall through the gap. I feel like we're always kind of within the minoritized population, but we never have a little bit of a torch on our own experiences. So that was really important for me to kind of shine a light on that and explore that. And it has been an amazing research experience. I found it very, very enriching and insightful. So that is my research question. And my current study, so I had 10 participants. The interviews are on Microsoft Teams. All my participants were current undergraduates at the time. Now they'll be at different stages, but at the time I did my study, it was 2 years ago now, they were all undergraduates, and I used reflexive thematic analysis to generate my themes. So it was qualitative rather than quant. So the key themes that came up with these three. So we have experiences of academic othering, the perceived need for academic humility, and culturally ascribed perfectionism. I just think it's important that everyone just has a second to read these properly, because I know there's quite a lot of words on here, so I'll wait a second before I move on. But these were the three key themes that I found, and I'll break down each one and what exactly that means to come as well. Okay. I also had some sub-themes, so it was a very nuanced, complicated analysis, and it actually felt reductive to just have those three. So within that, I actually have more sub-themes. I'll just chat through them quickly now, but it's not overly important to kind of have a screenshot of this. But within academic othering, I found strength in allyship, the spotlight effect, and perceived prejudice. Within culturally ascribed perfectionism, I found a lot about family pressures, academic reputation, and financial expectations. And then within the last theme, the perceived need for academic humility, there was a lot about underestimation of abilities, downplaying your achievements, and comparison-driven inadequacy. So again, granted, this can't be the longest talk. I can't go into depth about all of them, but we'll be touching them all on them all for sure. So we'll start with the first. So again, granted, there's a lot of writing, so I'll take it slow. If I'm talking too fast, please feel free to tell me to stop and take screenshots of this, whatever you want. So, but I'll have a little chat through this now. So my analysis found that within academic othering, it's this feeling that students found when they'd go into their lectures, they felt like their opinions weren't as acknowledged and not as accepted because they felt like the odd one out. They'd go into a white predominant cohort and they'd feel like against the rest of the white student body, they felt these differences, and these differences actually were working against them. Instead of feeling like there was something to sort of champion and trophy, they felt like they had to dilute their actual opinions to fit in with the norm, that white norm. Very, very importantly, this feeling was buffered, however, by finding allies. And when I say allies, peers that they felt like they could relate to. So if they found someone else on their course that looked like them, another South Asian, whether that be someone that just kind of got their opinion, that really buffered against that feeling of feeling like they stood out and like an outsider, which was very much a feeling that a lot of my participants felt. So here are some quotes which I think are really poignant actually. So one participant said, "Looking around the room, I feel like I don't fit in here." Another participant said, "When I speak to other people, I get a lot of relief when they're having the same worries and issues that I'm having." And the last one's cut off a little bit at the bottom there, but it says, "It feels like I'm the only one there and have totally different ideas to everyone else." And I think that's really sad that these feelings are there, because, you know, it's really difficult to get into university, especially with the barriers you have naturally of being a South Asian. You get to where, you know, you achieve and you get into university, you get there, and then you feel like your views and your thoughts can't actually be openly expressed and articulated because you feel like that you're going against the grain, essentially. So you want to then mute yourself. That was the feeling that was coming through from my participants. So it's really, really important that this spotlight effect, this feeling of walking into a lecture hall, you feel like you're not looks like you stick out like a sore thumb, you feel like there's a spotlight on you. And with that, you then want to naturally be a hermit and just kind of go in on yourself, and you don't want to speak up because speaking up means more attention's on you. And with that in mind, if more attention's on you, it perpetuates this feeling of imposter syndrome. Everyone's looking at me. I'm going to be found out. I'm undeserving of being here. You know, the more they find out about me, the more they're going to realize I'm not meant to be here. So it's kind of all feeds in. It's a cycle, and it's really, really, it's not true. And again, the fact that they've got into university, they've got the grades here, that doesn't matter. It's irrespective of confirmatory evidence. The fact that they are going into an institution where they don't see themselves there will be exacerbating this feeling of imposter syndrome naturally, because they feel like they're going in, they're the only ones there, spotlight on me, attention's on me, everyone's staring at me, this paranoia's exacerbated, and with that, all this attention is making them feel the sense of, I'm going to get found out, I'm a fraud, oh God, this is it for me now. Let me not say anything because I actually don't agree what everyone else is saying, but because I'm the outlier here and I'm the outsider, I'm just going to stay quiet. So of course that will obviously affect their experience of university as well. So yeah, that's in a nutshell the experience of academic othering. And again, this all kind of is under the guise of low self-esteem. Notably, it's really important that as I go through this, you might see a lot of overlap between perfectionism, low self-esteem, but it's really, really important to conflate all of these phenomena. They're completely separate, they overlap, but imposter syndrome doesn't mean you have low self-esteem. You can have similar experiences and low self-esteem could lead to imposter syndrome, but it's important to not conflate them as they are distinct constructs. Okay, so the next theme is culturally ascribed perfectionism. I know personally this is something that I've grappled with myself and something I really relate to. Massive perfectionist. Sometimes I won't stop until I feel like it's at a certain standard. I'm someone that likes things to be done perfectly in every aspect. And yeah, so I feel like I really related to my participants in this. So what I mean by culturally ascribed perfectionism, it's culturally located. So it's high stakes and exacting standards across all facets of life. So there is this feeling that you have to be perfect, not just academically, you've also got responsibility at home. So to be a model son, a model daughter, clean, cook, be polite, be a nice person. You're representing your family as well. Be a good sister-in-law, be a good auntie. In every single role that someone might have, you have to be perfect in it. And being a student and being academically thriving is one of 20, for example. So you're balancing a lot going into these institutions. And again, it's this feeling that you're not just representing yourself. It's a very much collectivist culture in that you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the sake of the family. So these quotes, again, I think were really, really striking. And this one I'm about to read out now is the title of my publication. Actually, I thought it really is really strong and powerful. And it says, I want to make my parents proud rather than I want to make myself proud, as I've been handed golden opportunities that our parents and grandparents would only have dreamt of. The next quote is, the South Asian standard is to be a well-rounded individual, performing well at school, your job, and help parents in whatever way around the house, for example. So there was this real feeling of guilt that, my ancestors or my parents or my grandparents, they sacrificed so much to get me to this country. I'm in this country now, I have these amazing opportunities, I have access to education, I went to school, women have access to education. I have no excuse but to be the perfect performing student and get the best grades ever. Anything less of that, anything short of that, I'm not good enough. So again, this feeling of perfectionism, but also rid yourself of the feeling of being able to feel like you've actually succeeded and actually internalized your achievements, because it's frustrating, because on the one hand, when you do well and you get an amazing grade, for example, if you get a first, you get it, so you've met the expectation, but once you get there, you're not allowed to actually really feel it because it's almost a given. Like you've kind of just met the minimum standard, which is extremely high, but you get there, but it's like, yeah, okay, now what? Yeah, but then at the same time, if you don't get that, you've got so much pressure to achieve that. It's just, I think it's just a very, very, I think, anticlimactic experience. You probably, when you're doing the work, you're feeling all this pressure and you're feeling all of these high stakes and you're probably panicking and you're probably even idealizing the feeling you'll get. And then you get this grade and it's like, well, yeah, obviously, my parents got me here, no excuses. This is how it should be. So, yeah, there's also this thing of the financial expectations. So again, in the same vein, this comes from parents who are immigrants who, naturally sacrificed a lot and had in the hope that coming to the UK will grant them a sense of stability, security, financial aid as well. But again, that's very much put on to the undergraduates, that pressure that, okay, get an education so you can provide for me, offer your family a stable life. And within that vein, a lot of students felt like they couldn't actually pursue the careers they'd want to, because then there's also an unspoken sort of career acceptance. It's your medicines, it's your engineering, it's your law, it's those careers that are the ones that are considered to be acceptable. So again, it's balancing, and it's a tension of, am I pleasing my family? Am I pleasing myself? Am I doing what makes my family happy? Am I doing what I want to be, what I actually want to do? It's constantly grappling that, because at the end of the day, the reason why they felt the pressure to have these certain degrees is because they're traditional careers that do conventionally provide a certain level of income and stability. And I guess when you're representing the family, it's also probably a language that other people can speak. If you say my daughter's a doctor, everyone registers that and they'll get it, but if you say my daughter's in music, that's not going to hit home the same way. So again, it's sort of this constant tension between pleasing the family and pleasing yourself. And a lot of participants just felt it'd be easier if they just did what kind of was in the best interest of the family, just to make it easier for everyone, other parties as well. So again, that amount of pressure, and you're having this constant internal narrative and internal conflict, it'll feed into this sense of imposter syndrome, because you can achieve all the things you want, but it'll never feel like enough, essentially. So that's the culturally ascribed perfectionism theme. Now we'll come to the perceived need for academic humility. Again, I feel like it's just this constant toxic vicious cycle, in that you get what you get and you achieve what you need to achieve, and you can't even talk about it. Because again, this quote here at the bottom, you can't shout too loud when you win, I think is very powerful, and it's very poignant. So you can do all the best things in the world, but again, it's like, shh, be humble, like be shy, sit down, don't say too much, don't take up too much space, be quiet. And again, you could achieve the most in the world, but you're constantly still going to be second guessing yourself and worrying that you're going to be found out. So there's this constant need to minimize your successes, even when they're amazing successes. There's this belief within the culture that you're being arrogant, and just stay quiet, just achieve, and really show your success by your money, by your cars, by, like, again, it's this sort of image-based and reputational focus on what everyone else will think of you. But again, that can't really come from what you say and how you speak of it. Words will show that. So for example, if you succeed and you get a good job, we'll have a really big house to show everyone, rather than you coming home and being like, I got a first. So again, it's just different visions for what success will look like. And I think often these students felt like they had to temper the language that they succeeded in. So instead of saying, I've done well, I've worked really hard, I spent this many hours on an essay, and I achieved this, and this is my feedback, that doesn't really matter. What matters more is that you've got a first class degree. So it's not really about the process, it's about the outcome and the product. So again, it's this need to stay humble, stay humble, stay humble. But then you've also got this narrative of do well, be perfect. Anything short of that's not good enough. So there's so many things to be grappling there. So yeah, and there's also the comparison driven inadequacy. So there's a need to overcompensate as well. So despite objective confirmatory evidence that you've done everything that it takes to get to where you need to be, there's also this feeling within participants that they must sort of do more to be on par with their peers. And again, I think this comes down to, it links in with the first theme, wherein when you feel like the odd one out and an outsider, you probably feel like you need to do more and overcompensate. So a lot of my participants felt a lot of burnout, because they'd be kind of doing above and beyond just to feel on par and feel worthy and feel like they deserved a place at university. So again, this constant narrative and a constant voice of just, you're not good enough, this isn't good enough, do more, do more, do more. And then when you do more and achieve, don't talk about it. And then it repeats. And that's just an ongoing narrative throughout the university experience that my participants are feeling. So yeah, there's definitely a lack of self-actualization, there's a distorted image, constantly feeling like you're going to be found out and that you're a fraud. But this is really, there's no evidence of this, essentially. So implications for higher education. So I think it's really important when I was doing this research that there were some key take-homes, that there were some really important tangible impacts that can come from this paper. And so there's a few more slides on this, but embedding culturally responsive support, I think it's so important that South Asian populations and students feel heard and supported. Even things like Ramadan, for example, like you'd be surprised that even at University of Leeds, I mean, it's an amazing faculty, I'm not saying it's not, but they've only just instilled a prayer room now for Ramadan, and as of this year, and you'd assume that sort of thing would all be put in place. But honestly, I think just having those conversations and letting staff members know what can we put in place to actually support students. So for example, this paper's been out, this paper has now been circulated around my university, and now staff members are aware of what the pressures that South Asian students face. So it's really important just to disseminate this research, make it known to other professionals who maybe aren't South Asian. Again, addressing academic othering, it's so important that we now know from my research, that having allies buffers this experience of imposter syndrome. Okay, so with that in mind, if an academic sees two South Asians or two Muslims, for example, introduce them to each other. That will entirely change their whole university experience. And again, I know there are some societies that exist across universities that do that, but again, you're relying a lot on the initiative of the student to go and find those communities themselves. That should already be there from day one within their actual cohort within their course. So that was something else that I've acknowledged there too. Again, this is just, I guess, the nature of research. Mine is the first paper that's looking at South Asian experience of imposter syndrome. So within that vein, I had to start off small, so my sample is only 10. And granted, it's not going to represent every single subgroup of the South Asian community. You know, what I'm saying here, I'm not assuming it's applicable to a Bengali community, a Gujarati community, you know, an Indian community. I'm not saying that. So that from this research, it's really important that we look at more subgroups. We focus on, you know, other differences between Pakistani experiences and Bengali experiences, for example, and compare them. So it's really, really, really important not to homogenize the South Asian student. You know, South Asia is a massive, massive, massive subcontinent, and it's full of different cultures. So it's really important not to assume as generalize findings to every single person within those communities. Again, I talked about this before, improving conceptual clarity in student support, low self-esteem, perfectionism, all these constructs, they're distinct from each other. The definition of low self-esteem cannot be assumed to that of imposter syndrome. So it's really important that there are overlaps for sure. But just to make it clear that people aren't taking one thing from low self-esteem as a definition and putting it on to imposter syndrome. It's a very separate phenomenon. Imposter syndrome is entirely the experience of feeling like you're not good enough, you're undeserving, like you feel like a fraud, you're going to be found out, irrespective of confirmatory evidence. And then if low self-esteem comes into your findings and comes into your experience, that's okay, but just important not to conflate the two. So what educators can do now. So I've done a lot of talks to educators, and these are what I've always encouraged. So foster open conversations about cultural pressure and identity. Talk to students about their experiences. I think there's this almost like this sort of wall in between these conversations. I think some educators are really scared of going in and just being like, I don't know much about your culture. Can you please tell me? I want to know what's going on. But that's where these conversations start, and that's what needs to happen. I think feeling seen is the number one thing here. Again, it goes against the whole spotlight effect and this perceived prejudice feeling. If a staff member comes up to them and just asks them how they're doing and kind of wants to know the context of which they come from in a very not in an accusatory attacking way, just kind of out of curiosity and care, I think that will change the experience for a lot of South Asian students. Again, I think it's really important when career advice is happening. I know during university, there's a lot of conversations of what you're doing next, your next steps. I think it's really, really important that there's an understanding that South Asian students might not actually be able to pursue what they want to do, not because they're not interested in it, but because at home there are certain narratives that they don't want to go against the grain, because that will actually cause a different barrel of problems. So just having that awareness is really, really important. Again, tailoring wellbeing and success interventions to cultural contexts, and again, encouraging authentic peer connection and mentoring opportunities. So this is something that I've implemented within my university mentoring. So students will be buddied up by a South Asian, or they can kind of pick what subgroup they come from, who, for example, the second year or third year, and they're buddied up with a fresher, and then they're sort of guided throughout the university process, and they have each other. And I think that's done the world of good. And I think it just automatically puts students at ease. I'm also a postgraduate teaching assistant, and I do lectures, and often it's actually really, really lovely when I'll go in, I'll be stood there. I think the first thing that the students think is, who is this girl? She looks about 12. How is she teaching a lecture? So I always preface that I'm doing a PhD, like I'm not a lecturer, I'm not a professor. But from that, often when I see hijabi students come in, or another South Asian, their face will just light up. And they'll come up, every single one of them has come up to me and been like, so tell me, like, and they're very interested, like, how have you got here? And I'll explain, and they're like, okay, so that there is a space for us here. Someone like me is actually welcome in academia, and it's possible to actually get a scholarship. And I'm like, yeah, of course it is. And they're like, right, okay. Just that, don't ever underestimate just the visual of just seeing someone who looks somewhat like you in some capacity there doing what you could be doing in a few years' time and is further ahead than you. So I think for me, that mentoring is really, really, really important. And since then, not that I've had to, it's not part of my job role, but I often just email those students just to keep in touch with them and just ask how they're doing. And a few of them have wanted more meetings off the back of it, but just making sure that my line's always open, my LinkedIn's always open, I'm always replying to messages just to make sure that I'm accessible and available as possible. I don't want it to be like, I'm the only Muslim PhD student in the department, therefore don't talk to me. I think it's really, really important just to make sure that you come across as welcoming and as accessible. And I'm sort of making it very clear that there is space for us. And for example, networks like this are so important because I've been fed back to some students, no, there's loads of us actually. I mean, not as many as there should be, but there is a community of South Asian women who are in academia and they're thriving, and they're so powerful and outspoken, and these conversations do happen. But again, I think it's just talking does wonders, and I think just making yourself seen and present. And I know some people, my mum, for example, she's a massive introvert. She's the opposite to me. I think the thought of her doing a talk's like out the hell. But she's a very successful Muslim South Asian woman. She's nearly 60 now. She got into the clinical doctorate when it wasn't really a thing for Muslim South Asian women at all. She went through her different barriers, but I think seeing my mum do it, I think subconsciously has made me very confident, because I don't see myself as a reason for all my barriers or my culture to be a reason why I shouldn't do something just because I don't see myself there. And I think that's really, really important to just let people know. It's in my blog as well. One of the take homes is in, just because you don't see yourself in the spaces doesn't mean you don't belong and you're not needed there. So I think that's one thing I really echo to my students for sure. So again, just more specific, really, recommendations for higher education. So bridge programs. So bridge programs is something that I found out about when I was doing my research, and I love the idea of them. So essentially, I think it's really, really overlooked when students, for example, are applying, they've done their A-levels, they're applying for university or year 13 when they're looking into it, and they're like, okay, so here's the student loan company, sort your loan out. Things like that, to some students, that's just going to be completely foreign to them. Like, you're suddenly responsible for your finances, and you need to apply for them, and there's so many different criteria with them, and just go and do it and be ready for university and read this and read that. A lot of students don't come from nurtured educational backgrounds where that sort of stuff makes sense to them. They're often pioneering education for the first time. So bridge programs are essentially the summer before you start university. They're sort of like a kind of whistle-stop tour of everything you need to know about university. They'll kind of do a little bit of a slowed process of how it'll work, how to navigate things like university softwares, how to actually navigate student loans and how to sort of apply for them. It's sort of just making sure that you're not assuming every student knows what you're talking about, basically, because a lot of these words are foreign. Higher education can seem very daunting. You're kind of coming into it. Some students will move out, some won't. Regardless, I think think both have different pressures about them. If you're commuting from home, you're still navigating your home life and going into university. And I think a lot of students feel like that's a dichotomy of navigating two lives. And then if you move out, again, that's a completely different situation. You're moving out for the first time. So yeah, so bridge programs, I'm a massive advocate for. Peer mentoring, as I already mentioned as well. Outreach programs. So I'm an educational outreach officer as well, and fellow. So I go into a lot of schools and sixth forms. And again, and it's often in schools that are disadvantaged. So it's working with children who have the potential, but because of socioeconomic reasons or just contextual reasons, they are less likely to probably reach their potential. So I'm going in there and I'm working directly with them to make sure that they're supported as most as they can to give them the best sort of chances of their future aspirations as possible. And I'm just there as a mentor for them. But again, I just remember, so I went into a school in Bradford, this is about a month ago, just before New Year. And you should see the look on the, because a lot of the children, I don't know if I should say children, kids, they're like 17, 18, they were predominantly Muslim. And when I went in with my hijab on, you could just tell that the way they looked at me like, hang on, they brought you in? Like someone that looks like us, then people like you exist. And again, it just makes all the difference. And I'm there talking and I was showing them my graduation pictures and how my experience of university was so positive. And I had amazing supervisors, and I still do. And yeah, they're white academics and they have their own privilege, but they're so receptive to these conversations. I'll challenge them, and people like that do exist, but don't shy away from spaces you don't see yourself in. So again, outreach programs, I think, never underestimate the value of them. Co-create initiatives with South Asian students. When I was in my second year of my undergrad, so when I was 20, so a few years ago now, I was invited to be on this committee for decolonising the curriculum, and it was me and it was like 6 other professors. I remember being sat there just thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here. What is this? But they generally just wanted my opinion. It wasn't an ambush. They weren't trying to trip me up. They generally just wanted to know what I thought of different things and wanted my take on it. And I think feeling like I was valued and seeing my voice actually would make a difference made all the difference. So I think it's really, really important that these educators and whoever's within universities who kind of have power to orchestrate these communities just make it really, really clear that they should be involving the students that they're wanting to be representatives for. There's no point having a meeting about Ramadan sensitivity if you haven't got a Muslim or South Asian in there, really. So I think it's just really important just to make sure that you have South Asian students within the conversations when you're planning the initiatives. I've talked about this already. Research subgroup specific experiences. So don't just assume every South Asian experience is the same. Talked about that already. And again, this is a really big concept to navigate imposter syndrome within South Asians. It's not going to be one study that's going to fix this problem at all. And also I wanted to raise this as a point. And this is something I'm kind of grappling with myself. So we say imposter syndrome, right? Is the word syndrome not just pathologizing the normal human experience? Because isn't it quite normal to just feel a bit funny if you're going into a new kind of setting that's new to you and you care about it, those feelings of not feeling you belong, they can also go away over time. So that's a completely different study in itself that I'm probably going to look into. But I think that's just another thing just to mull over. I don't think the word syndrome is that healthy, to be honest. I think it makes you feel like the way you feel is wrong. And I think we have enough of that in the culture, to be honest. So I like using imposter phenomenon. That's why I'll often call it that. I think syndrome, it's not healthy at all. And again, if 82% of professionals feel imposter syndrome and you're calling it a syndrome, so we're all quite riddled with it then. And that just goes against the whole grain that if it's a syndrome and it's wrong, then why do so many of us feel it? It should be quite normal then. So yeah, within that, I'll finish off with, it's really important to recognise that supporting minoritised students is institutional, not individual. There's no point just supporting that one and thinking you're doing your work. It's so important that this is pervasive, it's disseminated, it's institutional wide. And again, granted, that will take a bigger body of work to come together, and that will take a lot of people doing the same work, but who care about it. But off the back of my research, I really do see a movement, and I do see a lot of students, even students that are coming the next generation, they really care about this. So I'm sure this is one to watch. But thank you so much for listening. I actually don't know what time we're on, so forgive me if I've waffled. But yeah, that's me. My email's there, my LinkedIn's there. So if any conversations want to come up and people don't want to just ask me directly in front of others, that's so fine. But yeah, that's me all done. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Noor. That's fantastic. Lots to take on there. So we've got a few questions in the chat, but before I go to the chat, what I'm going to ask is if anyone in the room has any questions, if they want to undo their mic and then ask the question directly to Noor,